There's a Daniel Green Cosmere take that lives in my head rent-free because of how wrong it is.
It's Dragonsteel 2022. Between shifts volunteering at the prize table for the coin exchange game, I had the opportunity to attend a panel that Daniel Green was a part of. He, along with Joy Allen, Lauren McCaffrey, and Amy of Coincidence Cosplay, hosted the Cosmere Survival Crash Course.
The first order of business on the panel was establishing what planet in the Cosmere is the most dangerous, so they could then say how to survive there. Now, what was Mr. Green's hot take? Which planet in 2022 did he think was the most dangerous in the Cosmere? Roshar. Daniel Green was out there on a panel in 2022 saying that Roshar was the most dangerous planet we've ever seen in the Cosmere. Now, I have a lot of respect for Daniel Green. He's an author, and the fantasy news segment that he does on his channel is invaluable and serves an underserved niche on YouTube of fantasy readers who want to know the news. But I really disagree with his take, dude.
Granted, the 4 secret projects hadn't been released yet, but we did have the previews for them. Planets without names. So I'm pretty sure if we asked him again in 2023, his answer would be different. So what is the most dangerous planet in the Cosmere, in my opinion? Before we answer that, we need to determine how we're deciding what constitutes a dangerous place. The vacuum of space and black holes exist in the Cosmere, but this list would be quite silly and somewhat boring if I said anywhere where a star is going supernova.
For the sake of this list, we are only going to be talking about places in the Cosmere that have been named and have had something written about them. This list will also contain slight spoilers for parts of the Cosmere. I'll try to avoid story stuff where I can, and where I can't, I will provide a timestamp for where to skip to if you don't want elements of the book spoiled for you.
To be considered, we'll have to have seen more of a planet than a simple throwaway line, like AT has at the end of Secret History. That is simply Vax, and extrapolating that the planet or place of Vax is similar to the cognitive realm on Scadrial. So the planets that will not be considered in this list of the most dangerous places in the Cosmere are Braze, Utal, Oberdai, Vax, Mythos, Bajendal, Elegy, Monody, Second of the Sun, Third of the Sun, Fourth of the Sun, Done, and all gas giants that exist in the planetary systems of the Cosmere.
With those exclusions taken care of, let's go over the scenario. If a normal, non-invested human was just dropped on a planet without a guide, how quickly would they die?
I'm mostly considering what I like to call ambient danger. Things that are common and pervasive to a place, but are incredibly deadly. Certain places are inherently more dangerous than others. If you pulled this thought experiment with Earth, for example, it's really just the luck of the draw for where an unfortunate human would land. Are they going to be teleported into the Great Plains of North America, the Amazon rainforest, the middle of the Pacific Ocean? Planets are massive and usually diverse.
For this thought experiment, we'll be considering the dominant terrestrial ecosystem to the best of our knowledge. So they don't, like, spawn in the middle of an ocean or something.
Starting off this list with the safest places, we have the Earth analogs. These being Cell, Scadrial, and Nalthis. These were pretty clearly Earth-like planets. With plants and animals reminiscent of those found on Earth, Scadrial being the most Earth-like planet at 1.0 Cosmere standard, and having animals like lions, dogs, and giraffes, Nalthis has jaguars, elephants, and monkeys. Cell is 1.5 times the Cosmere standard, so gravity is stronger on this planet, but otherwise, it's pretty Earth-like.
All 3 of these places are tied for being the safest on this list because their ambient danger levels are just Earth. If we were talking about the cognitive realm on this list, Cell would be much higher.
Right above these 3, we have Daniel Green's pick for the most dangerous place in the Cosmere, Roshar. Roshar would definitely feel pretty alien. 3 moons, no soil, giant crustaceans running around, and a lower gravity than Earth at 0.7 Cosmere standard. But in terms of ambient danger, I think the bulk of the planet is pretty low. So long as you're not in Amia or the eastern part of Roshar, high storms don't really seem to be that big of a threat. Chris does claim in the Roshar essay that the danger of these storms cannot be overstated, but by the time the storm gets to central Roshar and the Pure Lake, the storms are not nearly as deadly. The Pure Lake drained into pits and holes when the storms came, so you shoved your raft into a crevice between 2 ridges of stone and huddled up next to it, using it to break the fury of the tempest. The storms weren't so bad out here as they were in the east, where they flung boulders and blew down buildings. Oh, he'd heard stories about that sort of life. New Rollick said he never had to go to such a terrible place. Besides, it was probably cold there. Ishuk pitied those who had to live in the cold. Why didn't they just come to the Pure Lake? Roshar also has more oxygen in the atmosphere than Earth. so fire is more deadly. For this reason, most people utilize fabrials instead of fires and combustion engines. This might catch a newcomer by surprise if they're trying to survive. I mean, just ask the people of Rathalas how deadly fire can be.
Daniel Green's reasoning for this on the panel, at least, was storms and wildlife. And I just don't agree with that, man. Like, there are places in the Cosmere with more abundant, frequent, and dangerous natural phenomenon, and more proactive and dangerous wildlife than Roshar. But look, I'm not saying that white spines and axe hounds aren't dangerous, and chasm fiends are no slouches either.
White spines hunt in packs, and they're as large as horses. But so far as we know, they're only in Alethkar and the east, which is already more dangerous because of the stronger high storms. They have been known to live near roads like man-eater tigers on Earth.
Roshar is undoubtedly more hostile than Earth, but compared to other places in the Cosmere, it's downright pleasant.
After Roshar, we have Komashi. Most of the planet is very hot. Heat here rises from the ground, creating updrafts and intense geothermal activity. According to Hoyd, the ground is not hot enough to burn cloth, but it can burn skin if left in contact with the ground.
The next part of this video is going to be super spoilery for Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, so if you don't want that book spoiled for you, and it's a really good book, you should skip to this timestamp right here.
Komashi has 3 different ecologies. Before the Father Machine was deactivated, the splinters of the Shard Virtuosity resided in the ground, making the landscape very geothermically active and exceedingly hot.
If a newcomer was dropped into this landscape, they would most likely die very quickly. It would be like dropping someone into a sauna made entirely of stone. They would die of dehydration very quickly, and water is scarce. There are cold springs on this planet, but they're pretty rare. After the Father Machine was activated, the entire planet was covered in a shroud of living nightmares, made from the detritus of the souls that it consumed to power itself.
These nightmares would seek out the living by their cognitive aspect and kill them. A side effect of the sun being blotted out and the ground being cooler was the formation of oceans. Have you, he whispered to Yumi, ever visited the oceans on your planet? The what? She said. I don't know that word. Water, he said. Enormous bodies of water, like the Cold Spring, but huge. We have a few of them here. Our cities run to the edges of them. One of the oceans could take an entire day to cross, he'd heard, using a Heon-line boat.
This landscape is incredibly deadly in a more different and active way than before. If our normal human were just dropped onto Komashi with the shroud up, they would probably be torn to shreds by nightmares pretty quickly. Where things get more complicated, though, is after the events of the book. The defeat and deactivation of the Father Machine forced the Shroud and nightmares to dissipate. This returned not only the sun to the sky, but the heat to the ground.
You'll be happy to know the planet Komashi survived. Find it in the Utol system in dual orbit with the planet Utol, which you might have heard about for other reasons. The emergence of the sun didn't cause an utter catastrophe on Komashi, though they did learn the hard way about sunburns. Turns out, a number of the spirits liked being Heon lines, and were persuaded to continue in that service with proper payment.
I assume that the oceans that formed under the Shroud wouldn't dissipate entirely. They might shrink a little bit, but I think they'd still be there. Komashi is not going to be quite as hot. It might be like unpleasant, but not as deadly as before. And in terms of wildlife, now that the nightmares are gone, what's gonna kill ya? A giant raven that went extinct?
The next planet on this list is tricky. Taldane. The planet is tidally locked around 2 stars. One side, dark side, faces a white dwarf star surrounded by dust. This bathes half the planet in a dim, near-perpetual night. Despite this, the ambient levels of danger seem very low. Most life on darkside seems to have adapted to glow under UV light, and the plants seem to grow without a problem. The fauna is different than the Earth analogs, but not necessarily more dangerous. The other half of Taldane is where the danger lies. Dayside Taldane perpetually faces a blue supergiant star and consists of one large landmass of near total desert. There's a single river system providing a small crescent of land suitable for cultivation called Losand. If our newcomer human were dropped into the deserts of the Kurtza, they would die of dehydration before they could reach a settlement or the river. Most of the water on Dayside exists under the sands in Dorim vines. These vines contain water and seem to be relatively common. The trick is that you need water to attract the vines to you in the first place. And when water is poured on the ground on Dayside, Dorim vines move towards the surface. As a defense mechanism to deter the local fauna from eating them, these vines are full of water.
It's unlikely that a newcomer would know how to access this water, and combine that with the sweltering, unending day on Dayside, they would most likely die of dehydration within 2 days, despite having an abundant source of water just out of reach under their feet.
Moving on to the next planet on our list is Scadrial from the first Mistborn series, also known as Era 1. Scadrial was an inhospitable, hot, ash-covered landscape. In an attempt to burn away the mists, the entire planet was moved significantly closer to the sun.
The land of the Final Empire was moved further north, and ash mounts were created in the region to cool it.
Humans and all life remaining on Scadrial in Mistborn Era 1 were only able to survive because they were genetically modified to be more resilient to the ash. In the Hero of Ages, Epigraph 25, we read, "There was a physiological difference between Ska and nobility. When the Lord Ruler altered humankind to make them more capable of dealing with ash, he changed other things as well.
A human who lacks these modifications is going to have a really bad time. The food's going to be borderline inedible, and breathing is going to be physically painful. Without help from people who live in-world, they would surely die very quickly."
When asked if there were any people that left the Final Empire, Brandon Sanderson said, "There were groups who would go out there to escape the Lord Ruler, and the Final Empire in general. Survival was practically impossible. It's possible someone might have gotten across to the southern continent, but it would have taken a small miracle."
Speaking of the southern continent, the Malwish. The southern Scadrians were a genetic reserve in case the modifications made to the northerners led to their extinction. These unaltered humans were only able to survive through some mechanical method given to them by Rashek. We don't know what it is, it hasn't been confirmed, and it's most likely not the medallions because they didn't have that technology until Era 2 and the Sovereign gifted them the medallions.
Above anti-verdant Scadrial on the list, we have Yolin, the planet Hoid and the original vessels are from.
We haven't had an official scene set on this planet yet in the Cosmere, but we do have excerpts from unpublished stories that take place here, such as The Traveler, Lyre of Partenel, Lightweaver of Wrens, and also Dragonsteel Prime. I've read the ones listed above, or at least the parts that are available to the public. I haven't finished Dragonsteel, unfortunately. I just read it in the basement of the BYU library for a little bit once.
Yolin was a planet split between two ecosystems. Troon life, life that we are familiar with, and Fane. Fane life is characterized by its bone-white color and organisms with 6 appendages. It's essentially a mirror of normal life.
Fane life slowly spread across the entire planet and eventually came to dominate the entire thing. Ingestion of any Fane life is deadly to humans and any other Troon life, even though simple interaction with it isn't. In terms of ambient danger, Yolin is pretty high on the list. It's covered in moss that can kill you if you even get a little bit of it in your mouth, bone-white trees. If our normal human just gets dropped onto this planet, they're going to be a little weirded out, and obviously not like immediately go and try and eat some tree bark or some moss or something. But eventually they're going to get hungry, and they're going to try and eat something that will kill them.
Of the 3 planets in the Dromonad system to support life, the only one that a book takes place on is First of the Sun. Not much is known about this planet and its environment. The only story we've had from here is Sixth of the Dusk. This story took place on a chain of islands away from the mainland. Because of this, we know next to nothing about the physical characteristics of the mainland.
We don't know for certain if the plants and animals there can detect and hunt by minds, but I think it's safe to assume that, like on the Pantheon, even if it's not quite as dangerous, the flora and fauna of First of the Sun can at least detect the minds of other organisms.
We know that birds from the mainland, called aviar, don't develop a talent there, but we don't know if that means they also can't detect minds.
Again, we've only seen things from First of the Sun that take place on the Pantheon Islands, not the mainland. And also, the Pantheon Islands were deliberately made to be challenging. The islands of the Pantheon are known to be especially dangerous. Predators here can detect and make a weak connection to the mind. As such, all predators are very active hunters. And because we don't know that much about the mainland, I think this is a fair spot to put first of the sun on the list, just given what we know.
Lumar is the Ramona Flowers of planets, but instead of 7 evil X's, it has 12 deadly spore C's. Some spores are more deadly than others, but they are a nearly unavoidable fact of life on Lumar. All of these spores react violently to water. We know from the book that sweat has enough water to activate spores.
We do know that there are mainlands, or bigger islands, that can support lakes of water. How this works with all the spores around there, I don't really know. I don't imagine that all the islands are super salty. Do they have like giant walls covered in silver? I don't really know. But what we do know is that there are mainlands large enough to support lakes of water.
In Tress of the Emerald Sea, we learn from Huck the approximate size of the King's Island. 40 miles, Tress said. They'd run out of land and fall off the island if they raced that far. Do they go in circles? Oh, Tress, he said, most islands aren't the size of the rock, you know. Really? She said. You mean there are some that are 40 miles wide? And bigger, he said. I think one in the Zephyr Sea is 60 miles across.
What's unclear is how common these islands are, and if they have the same salty protection as Diggins Point. Regardless, interaction with even a single spore activating on or near your person is usually deadly. Our unaware, panicked, sweaty human would most likely die very quickly on their first interaction with a spore.
At third place, we have Ashen. Located in the Rosharan system, this planet is something like 98% unlivable. Without getting into spoilers, Ashen has been called the Burning Planet.
We haven't seen anything explicitly from Ashen yet. We do have a couple of characters in Rhythm of War who talk about it in a flashback, but other than that, we haven't had a scene set on the planet. There is an excerpt, a chapter or two, from a short story called The Silence Divine that takes place on Ashen, available online.
The only people who still live on this world live in floating cities held aloft by magic. This magic is tied to disease. Basically, their entire society rests on the fact that people called incubators can keep the cities aloft so long as they're sick.
Resources are scarce, but they still have the means by which to create gunpowder somehow. Most likely, our normal human is going to be dropped into one of the uninhabitable burning portions of the planet. But if they get dropped into a city, I don't think their odds are that much higher for survival because 1, resources are scarce, 2, the people there don't seem particularly friendly to outsiders in the excerpts available, and 3, you have to be sick to survive there, essentially. And I don't think a normal human is gonna have super good tolerance to magical disease, but I could be wrong. I think this is a fair place to put it on the list, though.
Second place really could be first here. Canticle, the world from the Sunlit Man. This planet is super weird and super deadly. This tiny planet rotates every 10 hours or so.
During this time, the surface of the planet melts and burns. Anything the sunlight touches dies. If our normal human gets dropped in one of like the few lush valleys after a rainstorm, great, they're dead within 10 hours. You cannot outrun the sun on foot. You can't even get underground because the entire surface of the planet melts. Canticle is undoubtedly one of the most dangerous and inhospitable places in the entire Cosmere, and it has a serious argument for being in first place. However, I think there is one planet that beats it out in terms of ambient danger levels in the Cosmere, and that planet is Threnody.
Threnody is the most dangerous place in the Cosmere for a normal person. There are 2 continents on this planet. The smaller continent is considered hell by the Threnodites, but this is where all living people on the planet are now known to reside. This planet is plagued with aggressive ghosts or cognitive shadows called shades. These shades cover the land, mostly invisible in the day and visible at night. Their eyes glow an unsettling green unless someone breaks one of the simple rules. These rules are 1, do not kindle flame, 2, do not shed the blood of another, and 3, do not run during the night.
A normal person just isn't gonna know about the simple rules. They're gonna be dead within like an hour.
You run, dead. You start a fire, dead. You kill something to eat, dead. And that's not even mentioning the homeland, the larger continent which is inhabited by something called the Evil, a force or entity so dangerous that it forced a mass exodus to the continent considered by the inhabitants of the planet to be hell.
Eventually, Threnody gets so bad between increasing factionalism and the evil that the Threnodites who left and settled on Canticle thought that it was safer than staying on Threnody. Again, that's Canticle, the planet that's so small and has a tiny atmosphere that the sun melts the surface of the planet of every 10 hours, was more preferable than staying on Threnody.
Even by people in-universe, Threnody is considered extremely dangerous. The Airi have troops in Shadesmar surrounding Threnody to presumably keep the Shades in.
And I think Brandon Sanderson agrees with me. When asked where he would like to live in the Cosmere, this was his response.
Verandus3 says, which of your worlds would you most and least want to live in?
So whenever I get this question, I say, can I go write quickly a short story in a really nice world where nothing is wrong, they have the internet, and authors can make a professional living as a novelist? I'll go quickly write one up and go live there. Because I don't really want to live in any of the worlds. I like air conditioning. These worlds are not necessarily great places to live. And then beyond that is, generally there is some world-ending event and or disaster coming that I wouldn't want to be around for. If I have to pick, I usually say Scadrial because they are closest to the tech level I want, but they are also the most commonly subject to world-ending things because there's going to be 4 series, at least, in the Mistborn world. So maybe Nalthis would be better. Because the fewer books I write about a place, probably the better, the less likely the world is to end anytime soon. It is definitely not Threnody. We'll just say that.
Well, there you have it. My rankings of the most dangerous planets in the Cosmere. If you disagreed, great. Leave a comment down below and tell me why I'm wrong and why you think your pick is more dangerous. And if you made it to the end of the video, why not consider subscribing? Yeah, you won't miss any Cosmere-related videos, and I've got a couple more of those planned in the near future. And as always, thank you for watching, and have an excellent time today. All right, guys. Bye.